part of this inquiry is now shifting from a possible abduction to an investigation that might involve death or murder.
We're not naive, but on numerous occasions the Portuguese police have assured us that they were looking for Madeleine alive and not, Madeleine being murdered.
The police now say they don't expect the long-awaited DNA results to be decisive, but they're not ready to clear the McCanns and want to speak to witnesses again.
This is a couple who are desperately looking for their missing daughter. The thought of them having Madeleine in the car is just obscene.
As it stands, the full DNA evidence that is being assessed in Birmingham is still not back in Portugal. We understand evidence has been recovered from the underside of the carpet lining in the boot of that Scenic. Fluid and hair from a corpse, not necessarily human, and a separate DNA sample that's a partial match from Madeleine and comes from a primary source.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear. Thoughts build up until I can't feel. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science. Does the British government want to know the truth? This is the question posed by Dr. Mark Perlin, an expert in DNA analysis. In an article penned just 2 days ago on June 30th in Forensic magazine. Further, he writes, cadaver dogs Eddie and Keela alerted the police to human blood in the apartment. Floor tiles, skirting boards, wall swabs, and certain sections were collected for DNA. The dogs also alerted to luggage in the trunk of a rental car the family had hired 3 weeks after Maddie disappeared. In total, there were 18 evidence items plus family references. This is certainly a very interesting development in terms of the narrative, something that we're not seeing in the mainstream media. This seems to be published on a very specialized magazine called Forensic Magazine. And so in this analysis, we're going to deal in more detail with Perlin's recent statement. I'll put a link to that in the description. If you're finding this analysis worthwhile, please hit the thanks button. By the way, I've got a surprise for members only. We're going to be taking you guys on a little trip over the next couple of days, so members only, do watch this space. I'll also be doing a live stream of the Brian Koberger plea deal. That'll be at around about 11 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. Check on your Google what time that is. Otherwise, just check on my YouTube channel for what time it says it's going to take place. At 7 p.m. my time in South Africa. Might be 6 p.m. in the UK. If you're finding this analysis worthwhile, please do hit the thanks button and let's get started.
Our senior Portuguese contact has said the partial results that have been sent are inconclusive and that he doesn't expect the full set will ever be enough on its own to bring a case.
The dogs got it right. British Forensic Science Service, FSS, scientists found DNA on the items. Their laboratory generated DNA data files, but they couldn't interpret their DNA mixture data. Inconclusive, they said. This is also from Dr. Mark Perlin. To say the dogs got it right, this is no small statement. Where the dogs alerted, forensics teams went in and took samples, and sure enough, they found human traces, human DNA. Perlin writes, they deemed 8 items too complex to interpret and 6 too meager. FSS scientist Dr. John Lowe could see parts of Maddie's DNA in the data, Perlin writes, but he couldn't unmix the mixtures. That is also quite a statement to make, that the British expert could see parts of Maddie's DNA in the data. I would be a little more cautious and qualify that to say they could see parts of what could be, potentially, Maddie's DNA in the data. But I think by the same token, when one is dealing with incomplete DNA evidence, it could be the DNA of more than just one person. I mean, technically, it could be anyone. But Perlin's observations on this aspect are nevertheless worth hovering over for a moment. He goes on to say, on a skirting board, the FSS reported a DNA result from at least 3 persons, too complex to permit a meaningful interpretation. Lowe conceded we cannot separate the components out into individual DNA profiles. Lowe lacked the computer technology to transform complex DNA data into simple, reliable answers. He could make no meaningful interpretation or meaningful comparison. In the blind eyes of the FSS, Perlin writes, Maddie's DNA evidence had vanished. That's also quite a strong statement. That DNA has yet to be conclusively proven to be Madeleine's. But if it is human DNA, whose is it? And what is it doing under the tiles of apartment 5A?
What did come to Portugal were not conclusive results, but rather said to be indicative. Also, the results from some of the tests are still missing. And these are once again not conclusive results, but rather indicative.
In 2019, Perlin writes, an Australian journalist sent Dr. Perlin Dr. John Lowe's report and email explaining why the FSS thought the holiday apartment and car mixture DNA were inconclusive. Perlin reviewed the documents. He saw that the FSS had produced highly informative DNA data, but crucially, felt they didn't know what it meant.
To be able to say with certainty that Maddie was there, or that this DNA was Maddie's, the test results would have to be 99% positive.
There is a little more to this narrative than is included here. At one point, the FSS claimed DNA tested in the rental vehicle was categorically Madeleine, which instantly cast suspicion on Madeleine's parents. Look at this report from the Standard. According to the Portuguese, the British Forensic Science Service told them that the DNA evidence found in the couple's hire car a month after the girl went missing was categorically Madeleine's. This led to the McCanns being questioned and made suspects. But 1 month later, the Forensic Science Service said it could not be sure whether the DNA belonged to Madeleine, her mother, or to her sister. Madeleine's DNA was also allegedly found on the windowsill of their Algarve holiday flat and in the car park. The McCanns always insisted that such DNA could have come from rubbish, including nappies. According to the Standard, it was the Portuguese police who initially queried, this is quite interesting, the Portuguese police initially queried the conclusive report by the FSS, which is a British institution, because based on their own testing, they found the results to be worthless. And this comes from the Standard. DNA blunder turned Kate McCann into suspect. Once the FSS reviewed their findings, certainly as I understand it, they backtracked and indicated, for example, that DNA found in the hire car could have been Kate's or Madeleine's younger female sibling. Tellingly, the same article suggests that cadaver alerts in apartment 5A could have been due to Kate McCann, remember she was a doctor, having contact with human cadavers as part of her work, which is an interesting and rare acknowledgement of the efficacy of these animals. But is the explanation possible? Is it probable? Is it reasonable? Another error highlighted in the report was that when British cadaver dogs apparently caught the scent of death in the flat, Portuguese detectives did not take into account that GP Mrs. McCann had come into contact with 6 patients who died before she went on holiday. And it's really on the basis of DNA evidence, inconclusive DNA that couldn't be linked to Madeleine, that the McCanns were cleared, as this headline, also from the Standard, confirms. The same article notes, it is understood that at yesterday's meeting the Portuguese team were told all the tests done so far have proved inconclusive and have produced results which would not stand up in a court of law. Portuguese scientists wanted the summit to determine how their UK counterparts had achieved results analysing samples they themselves had earlier deemed worthless. Back to Dr. Perlin. Perlin writes that he was asked if the inconclusive FSS results ruled out the DNA coming from Madeleine McCann. I told him, he said, no. In fact, the report specifically says that it could be her, but there's a balance of probabilities. Dr. Lowe needed to consider whether the match is genuine as opposed to whether the match came from chance. That is exactly what DNA match statistics do, but he didn't know how to calculate it. See, this is why one has to qualify an unambiguous conclusive statement. Yes, it could be her, but it could also be other individuals. I'd be interested to know whether the DNA recovered was sufficient to confirm the sex of any of the individuals. For example, did it confirm a female? Perlin goes on to write, the limited FSS methods could only give inconclusive answers to the McCann questions. As I said, the problem is Dr. Lowe's methods can't separate out the different people. It could be a match, but unable to balance it against the chance of coincidence. He can't tell. He just doesn't have the mathematics or computers to answer the question. So it is a statistical issue that is going on here. It seems to be a similar quandary faced by investigators in the Ramsey case. Tiny specimens and very, very sensitive instruments producing very, very complicated data. Well, how do you sort out this mixture of data? And apparently there's still not much capacity to interpret this data. Perlin goes on to say that he offered to run true allele at no cost on all 18 DNA evidence items. Comparing with the family references, the computer would then give an accurate answer to the McCann mixture problem. Perlin goes on to state that the match statistics would tell what people, known or unknown, had left their DNA on which items. An attempt was then made to get the data files Perlin needed to test the McCann DNA, but the response to these attempts to get information were rebuffed by what Perlin describes as a bureaucratic runaround. Perlin also writes, the UK Home Office, National DNA Database, Forensic Archive, Scotland Yard, the Leicestershire Police all refused several freedom of information requests made at the time. Detective Chief Inspector Nicola Wall, who heads up Operation Grange, I think currently, and Scotland Yard's $18 million Madeleine McCann investigation, I think he contacted her. He wrote to DCI Wall in April of 2019, that's 6 years ago, offering pro bono help using true allele technology. And what was the response to that? And look at this article in The Guardian from August 2008. British scientists warned DNA tests on a sample from Kate and Jerry McCann's hire car were inconclusive just days before they were made suspects. Dr. Perlin also writes that Luís Neves is the National Director of Portugal's Polícia Judiciária. In May 2019, Perlin sent him a letter, translated into Portuguese, also offering true allele assistance. I think grilos might mean crickets in Portuguese. And then he asks this question, does Scotland Yard believe that after spending 18 million taxpayer dollars to not find Maddie, that everything was done that could have been done? Would finding the truth mar someone's reputation? One thing I always found extraordinary in this case was that investigators had to go to Madeleine's bedroom in Britain to retrieve her DNA, and who knows whether that sample was definitely Madeleine. Even if it was, why couldn't a single sample of Madeleine's DNA be retrieved in all of Portugal? Not in her bed, not on Cuddle Cat, not in any of her clothing, not anywhere in apartment 5A.
If they are not 99% certain, it can be viewed as indicative, but not conclusive. And if it is not conclusive, the police or the courts should not make any statements at the moment, because they could be wrong.
Dr. Perlin writes, the Madeleine McCann investigation has stumbled down blind alleys for almost 20 years. Suspect Christian Bruckner will soon be released to be stained by unproven guilt or deprived of DNA innocence. The cybergenetics offer of free and immediate true allele testing still stands. The results would shed DNA light on Maddie's cold case disappearance.
The McCann's legal team has told us the results of its own tests on the car, conducted by experts, which reveal, they say, nothing incriminating. Our police sources say they have other evidence, which the media knows nothing about.
Dr. Perlin writes, as I told senior news reporter Tom Towers of London's Daily Star in April 2019, the government has a choice. They can seek the truth and open their DNA evidence to outside scientists to find the answer, or not. Well, which is it going to be? I'm not going to take it further than that. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.